I should say afternoon. This is Anna Bly with New Mexico Main Street. I'm the Communications and Media Specialist here. And we want to welcome you to the last in our lunchtime webinar series that we're holding this spring. We do have some additional ones coming up in a month or two. The current series of webinars we've been presenting have been providing an overview of the Main Street 4-point approach. And if you've tuned in to each of the sessions, you will note that they've been devoted to a specific point. And today we're going to cover Certified Executive Directors and Main Street America accreditation. Attendance is required for new executive directors, and we of course invite nonprofit leaders and board members and other individuals that work with your organization to attend, live during the webinar, and certainly to watch them later on YouTube, where we post them at a later date. We record these sessions, so again, they'll be available to interested individuals. Today, we are joined by Main Street Revitalization Specialist Amy Barnhart, who's our expert in organization, and she will be leading today's webinar. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today during your lunch hour. I'm excited to be here because as a rule follower, I do love to be in compliance and talk about compliance, and that's what we're talking about today. This is your 5th webinar in the Executive Director Orientation webinar series titled Ensuring the Compliance of Your Local Main Street Organization to Achieve Accreditation and Executive Director Certification. As Anna mentioned, I am a revitalization specialist with New Mexico Main Street, focused on the organization point and specifically capacity building and fundraising within that point. Hopefully by now, since this is the 5th webinar, you're all familiar with the GoToWebinar interface. If you're not, here's what you should be seeing in front of you right now. I think today's presentation will probably go 20 to 30 minutes potentially, because I am going to spend some time walking you through the dashboard as well, for those of you that haven't really had a chance to get in there and spend much time in there yet. You can see the webinar controls over here on the right. You can either listen via your computer or call in. And then we will allow 10 to 40 minutes at the end for any questions that you might have. I don't know if we've determined yet or not whether or not we will allow people to actually turn on their microphones and just verbally relay their questions, or if we'll just keep it being typed in. And then there is actually, you will see that there is a document that you can download, and that provides a little bit more detail around the courses and trainings and educational offerings that New Mexico Main Street provides, and that I'm going to be skimming over today as well. So there's me. Now you know what I look like if we haven't met yet. The main focus is going to be on the compliance requirements of your organizations with New Mexico Main Street, the National Main Street Center, your state, and your federal government as well. We're going to be looking at executive director training, attendance, and certification, board member training and attendance, data reporting to New Mexico Main Street, which would include your quarterly reports and the annual budget and salary survey. We'll be looking at budget and staffing requirements of your organization. We'll be going over all the compliance documents and putting a little bit of extra emphasis on the importance of your annual work plan and your transformation strategies and 4-points projects, as well as the 10 standards of Main Street justifications and accomplishments overview that we ask all of you to submit to us. We'll be talking a little bit about how you use the digital dashboard and then exploring in there a bit as well. We'll briefly touch on what the annual review and site visit consists of, and then touch on, what the difference is between being an affiliate versus accredited and how we make that determination. So, New Mexico Main Street training offerings. Surprise, the new Executive Director Orientation is one of them. Pro tip, you are doing that right now. So hopefully you are very, very close to being done with that. We have Introduction to Time Management, which some of you probably were able to participate in at our Winter Leadership Network meeting at the end of January. We have Project and Event Management, volunteer development, which is a training that I also put on and will be putting on in the fall. Nonprofit management and leadership, fundraising, and grant writing. Those are two more that you get to participate in with myself. Our New Mexico MainStreet Leadership Network meetings, which we hold 3 times throughout the year. The Building Creative Communities Conference, which actually, those of you that are new, you probably don't know much about this conference yet, but this typically subs in for our fall Leadership Network meeting whenever we hold this conference. And then, of course, the Main Street Now conference, which is coming up in just about a week and a half, that some of you are going to be able to attend in Kansas City with our great network of Main Streeters across the country. We also offer an annual webinar series. Now, that could be anywhere from 4 to 6 webinars, and the topics vary. Last year, we focused on board development topics, and we are planning to hold 2 design and historic preservation webinars later this summer in preparation for our summer leadership network meeting that we'll be holding. We also offer specialized institutes, and that might be just one held in one location, or we might offer them all over the state, 4 to 6 options. So last year, Eduardo and I put on a facilitation skills institute that we held in 4 different locations around the state. So we try to make it a little bit easier for staff and board to be able to access these trainings. We also provide arts and cultural district meetings and trainings. Those are specific to our standalone arts and cultural districts, as well as our main streets that have arts and cultural districts as well. And then we do provide some on-site trainings. For example, you might have Eduardo come in and do a board roles and responsibility training, or myself come in and do a fundraising training on-site for your organization. Now, I've highlighted those last 4 in pink because those are not necessarily required of you, whereas the rest of these trainings actually are required, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The ones that are not required are absolutely and strongly encouraged. So as an executive director, you have several one-time training requirements that you must complete. And then upon completion of your one-time training requirements, as well as your annual training requirements, you will receive executive director certification. So again, new executive director orientation, that is required. Lucky for you, you're almost done. Intro to time management, which is typically about a half day, though I would say now we've reduced some of these trainings to 2.5 to 3 hours. Time management covers basic skills and techniques for effectively managing your time as an executive director, both in the office and in regard to projects and events that you're managing. Project and event management is another one of our shorter trainings, and that is focused on advanced techniques for effectively managing and coordinating events and projects. Volunteer development, as I mentioned, this is one of my trainings that I provide. We focus on developing volunteer position descriptions and strategies for recruitment. We talk about training and management and trends that we're seeing in volunteer development as well. The nonprofit management and leadership training has now become a full day. And as I mentioned earlier, we are offering this as a regional institute. So there will be 6 held around the state, and that will be at the end of April and throughout May. Looks like we'll be in Gallup, Belen, Raton, Tucumcari, Lovington, and Las Cruces. So those will be all over the state, and I hope that you're all able to attend those and your board members as well. The fundraising, which is a 3-day series, we typically spread that out over a 3 to 4 month period because you do have homework, hooray, between sessions. So from this training, we'll spend a lot of time going over the basics and helping you develop a solicitation letter, a thank you letter, sponsorship forms, a fundraising plan, including fundraising strategies and projects, and that's all based off of your budget and your annual work plan and your account transformation strategy. For the grant writing training, again, that would be held over a 4-month period of 4 sessions. we actually develop a full proposal on a real project that you're working on. So by the time we get to the end of the training, the idea is that you have a proposal that you can tweak and adjust and actually apply for various grants. We want it to be a working document that you can use to apply for a grant that's maybe a easier grant to get $5,000, so that you could also use to apply for a larger grant that's maybe $80,000. So looking at really developing a good basis for a proposal in that training. And we also have a variety of guest speakers who come in and talk about their grant writing experience, as well as grants that are available from various departments within the state government and from some of our foundation partners as well. So these are all your one-time training requirements. Once you do it, you don't have to do it again unless you choose to. And I have had some people do fundraising twice and grant writing twice. Sometimes they forget that they've already taken it, or they think, oh, it's a new instructor. I want to see their approach. I'm going to participate and engage in that class. So it is optional for you to, again, participate in one of these trainings if you so choose to later on down the line. Our annual training attendance requirements for executive directors are attendance at the 3 New Mexico MainStreet Leadership Network meetings. We have introduced this new approach to all of you previously, but I'll be reiterating it again. In the winter, we'll be focused on the New Mexico MainStreet Economic Transformation Strategy that's focused on capacity building. At the summer Leadership Network meeting, we'll be focused on our Create Thriving Places strategy. And in the fall, we'll be focused on the entrepreneurial and creative economy. So in the past, each of our Leadership Network meetings was focused on one of the 4 points. Now, we are incorporating all 4 points into each meeting and showing how each of the 4 points support each of these strategies. As I mentioned earlier, we previously offered the Building Creative Communities Conference, which going forward, we intend to offer biannually. So this will take place at our fall Leadership Network meeting. So when it is held, you would be participating in this conference to maintain your certification and your annual attendance requirements. And finally, we do require that our executive directors attend the MainStreet Now conference within their first 2 years of hire. So some of you I know that are attending the webinar today are planning to be in Kansas City next week. Some of you are not. So we'll just remind your boards and your organizations next year that if you're not going this year, you do need to attend in the following year. This conference provides an amazing opportunity to learn from our other MainStreet programs throughout the country. And I can say that once you go to a MainStreet Now conference, you're definitely drinking the Kool-Aid after that if you're not already. We also strongly encourage our executive directors to attend the MainStreet 101 courses when they are at the MainStreet Now conference. Those are offered on the first day, and it kind of provides the national perspective on each of the 4 points. So really quick, here is the educational offering structure. Eduardo, my colleague, Eduardo Martinez, put together this slide, and this really does a good job of showing how all these trainings plugged in, because you might have noticed that was a long list of trainings that we went over earlier. So we have our new executive director orientation, which we have switched to an online webinar delivery. We have our fundraising and grant writing trainings, which are both multi-sessions, so 3 sessions for fundraising and 4 for grant writing. We offer several webinars throughout the year, between 4 and 6 typically, in addition to the new executive director webinars. And then we are now moving our half-day trainings on the front end of each of our Leadership Network meetings. So at Winter Quarterly, earlier this year, you would have taken the time management training if you were there. This year, we focus on the entrepreneurial and creative economy at that meeting, but going forward, the focus, as I mentioned earlier, will be capacity building. Next, we have a National MainStreet Conference, which always occurs in late spring, early summer. Summer Quarterly will have the project and event management training on the front end on that Wednesday morning. And the focus, as I mentioned, is on creating thriving places. Volunteer development will be held on Wednesday morning of the Fall Leadership Network meeting. This year, we will again be focused on the entrepreneurial and creative economy, but moving forward, it'll either be the Building Creative Communities Conference, or it'll be a focus on, well, moving forward, it will always be the entrepreneurial and creative economy focus, though it might sometimes be the Building Creative Communities Conference. This year, we're also offering the nonprofit management asset-based economic development trainings. Those are going to be the 6 regional ones that I mentioned earlier. In the past, as an executive director, you were required to do additional training to maintain your certification. However, now you are able to continue to maintain that certification by attending these leadership network meetings that you're already required to attend. So we've luckily taken an extra step out of the process and made it easier on all of you to maintain that certification. So requirements for board presidents and board members. We do require that at a minimum, the board president or a board member substitute attend 1 leadership network meeting per year. We recommend that that be the annual meeting, which is the Winter Leadership Network meeting that we just held in Santa Fe. And we also are making a point at our board roundtables at each of these meetings to focus on board development topics, as well as providing some training once a year to new board presidents. Because we found that while we have spent a lot of time focused on our executive directors, we have neglected our board presidents in the past, and we want to make sure that we can provide as much support and education as possible to make you all successful. Data reporting. So you probably all received an email from Keith about a week or so ago, Keith Shellstrom, who is our economic vitality specialist. And you may already have been asked to complete one of the New Mexico MainStreet quarterly reinvestment reports. These reports track a variety of information that is happening in your Main Street district. Number 1 is private reinvestment. That is exterior and interior improvements being made to privately owned buildings. We also track new businesses and new jobs created, as well as business expansion and business closures and jobs lost. We track buildings that are purchased, as well as any new construction that might be occurring in your district. Public sector improvements, that could be upgrading electrical, putting in new sewer systems, improving the streets. Those all count as public sector improvements. Public-private partnerships, public and private grants that your organization receives, your events and promotions, any housing projects that you're working on, as well as volunteer hours. So this is a great place to capture all those hours that your volunteers are putting in. These are reported quarterly, and then I have the dates right here for you. I've highlighted June 10th and December 10th in pink because both of those reports are actually required to be turned in prior to the end of that quarter. So if you know you have a board meeting coming up or some volunteer opportunities, you would pre-report those volunteer hours in those reports, or any other events or promotions that you have coming up. Alternatively, if for whatever reason it doesn't make it into the appropriate report, you can report it in a later report and just let Keith know that that was from the previous quarter. So at least we're still capturing that information. All of these stats that we're tracking are reported to the National Main Street Center. So this isn't New Mexico Main Street requiring this. I mean, this is actually required by National Main Street. And I've highlighted private reinvestment in pink because that is actually what we report to the state legislature. So that is how they hold New Mexico Main Street and our local communities accountable, is they want to know what sort of private reinvestment is happening in our district. The second data reporting piece that we require from all of you is the budget and salary survey. That goes out annually, typically in the fall, and it collects a variety of information. we ask you to share with us what the employment status of the executive director and the other staff are. Are they contractors or full-time? Are employees? Do you have an executive director plus an event coordinator? You know, what's your staffing situation looking like? What are the salary, benefits, and employee policies that apply to these employees and staff? What is your organizational budget? How much fundraising has your organization done, and how does that compare to the previous year? And the same goes for your government service contracts. Your contracts you might have with the city or county, have those gone up or down, and what is the amount? We'll also ask you what your community size is, how long your program has been in existence. We'll have a few questions related to financially related policies for your organization, and then also have you conducted a financial audit, and if so, when. So this is another piece that we do share with our National Main Street Center as well. And for those of you that were at the winter quarterly meeting in Santa Fe, you would have received a copy of the summary of the responses to the survey as well. This is a good way to sort of gauge where your organization is at in relation to other communities of your size, as far as salary of your employees, what you're bringing in fundraising, what your government service contracts are amounting to. So you can kind of look at where you might need to look at growing your budget or your executive director's salary benefits as well. So while we're on the subject of budget and staff, New Mexico Main Street does lay out some very specific guidelines as far as what is expected of affiliate and accredited communities when it comes to your operating budget, your municipal contract, and the number of hours that your staff are working. Now this spreadsheet here, this table, is actually included in the biannual memorandum of understanding between your organization, New Mexico Main Street, and your municipality. So you'll see here for rural communities with populations under 5,000, it is expected that they will have a minimum operating budget of $25,000 to be an affiliate program, $40,000 to be an accredited program. And the expectation is that the local government partner will have a service contract with the organization for a minimum of $20,000. For small size communities from 5,001 to 15,000, it's a $45,000 minimum operating budget for an affiliate, $60,000 to be an accredited, and then a $35,000 contribution from the local government partner. For mid-sized community or commercial neighborhoods of 15,001 to 50,000, we jump up the operating budget for an affiliate to 60,000, and then it stays the same to be an affiliate or accredited, and then there's an expectation of $40,000 for your municipal partners. For our large community urban programs over 50,000 in population, minimum operating budget should be $100,000 for both an affiliate or accredited, and the expected contribution from the local government partner should be $60,000. For a Main Street America affiliate staff person for a rural community, it should be 20 hours a week, and then we keep it the same for accredited programs as well. For our small community, mid-sized community, commercial neighborhood, and our large community or urban programs, to be an affiliate, your staff person must be 30 hours a week. To be accredited, they must be at 40,000. For our accelerator program, there is no staffing requirement, but you are required to have a contract commitment from your local government of $15,000. Now, I do want to point out this is very specific about stating operating budget. This is not including your program, your projects, or your events. Those are outside the operating budget. The operating budget is strictly what you need for your organization to survive. It does not include the programming or project. So when you're looking at your budget, you need to break it down in that way. I also want you to notice that while we do have requirements for operating budget, the requirements, I'll move this forward. The expected contribution from your local government partner is less than the amount that we accept for your operating budget. Notice for a small community, to be an accredited program, they need to have an operating budget of $60,000. but the expected contribution from their local government partner is only $35,000. So where does the other $25,000 come from? That comes from your organization engaging in fundraising activities. Traditionally, the government contract should only make up 30% of your budget. What happens when you are almost wholly depending on your government contract? And then suddenly, a large employer in your community closes, and your city has lost a ton of tax revenue. What happens then? They reduce your contract. And then where are you if you haven't been doing additional fundraising? So we just want to remind you to make sure that you are fundraising to make up that difference between the municipal contract and your operating budget. And ideally, you should be trying to match the municipal contract amount in your fundraising efforts. Because at the end of the day, if that municipal contract goes away, that can mean the difference between your organization continuing or closing down, and we do not want to see that happen. Okay, so now that I've gotten off my soapbox on fundraising, let's move on to the one-time organizational compliance documents that are required of you. Number one being your IRS Form 1023. That is the application to the IRS that allows you to be a nonprofit. So we need to know that you have that form, and you need to maintain that form that shows that you are a nonprofit, you are tax deductible. Your bylaws and any amendments to your bylaws. Once you have your bylaws done, you're good to go unless you identify things that need to be changed, and that's where the amendments come in. A conflict of interest policy, and this applies to board members on your board and any conflict that they might have in relation to the work that you're doing. Records retention and destruction policy, whistleblower protection policy, and then a fiscal controls financial management policy. Now, those top 5 are required by the IRS. You, as a nonprofit, must have all of those. If you do not, you are in violation of the IRS rules. Fiscal controls financial management policy is one that New Mexico MainStreet requires, and trust me, you want to have that policy in place. Both to, as board members, you want that in place to protect your money, and you as a staff person want that in place to protect yourself. This ensures that you have a policy that helps you determine how money is handled within your organization. It's very important to have. So these are all one-time compliance documents. Unless you're going back in to make some changes to any of these policies or your bylaws, you don't really need to worry about these again, other than following the policies and the bylaws. Now, there are a variety of annual compliance documents that are required of you by New Mexico MainStreet, by the National MainStreet Center, by the state government, and by the federal government. So those that we require from you include your current board roster. That would just be a list of your board of directors, their position. You might include what their occupation is, where they work, and their address. The current conflict of interest disclosures for everybody on your board roster. So you've passed your conflict of interest policy, and now these are the disclosures that they sign whenever they come on board to identify any potential conflicts that they might have with some of the work you're doing. And just sidebar, it's okay if conflicts are identified as long as the board member is not voting in relation to those conflicts. Your current fiscal year operating budget. Again, we're focused on the operating budget. You can have your programs and projects and events on there as well, but we do need to see the operating budget separated out. And make a point of saying fiscal year here because some of you are on a calendar year and some of you are on a fiscal year July 1 to June 30th. Your current annual work plan, which should include your economic transformation strategies, your capacity building strategy, your 4-point projects to move those strategies forward. The either letter of agreement or memorandum of understanding with your local government partner. These are actually biannual, so you don't have to worry about this one every year, luckily. Your municipal resolution of support should also be passed with that MOU. Sometimes we get the MOUs back without the resolution of support. That is required. So whenever you're getting ready to pass your first MOU, connect with myself or Eduardo or Rich or Daniel with the state program, and we can help you with that. And then your current local government contract or scope of services. So this would be the contract we discussed earlier, showing that the city or the county is contracting with you in the amount of $35,000 to implement X, Y, and Z services. And finally, your 10 standards of Main Street justification. So just to put a little bit of extra emphasis on your annual work plan, again, it should consist of 2 economic transformation strategies, 1 capacity building strategy, projects that support work in each of the 4 points, and then you should also identify project and strategy outcomes as well. When we come around and do your annual review and accreditation process, we are going to be looking at those strategies, the projects, and the outcomes that you're seeing from them. Are you implementing projects you've identified in your strategies? Are you moving that work forward? If you need any assistance with developing or refining your strategies, your projects, your outcomes, or your work plans overall, please do not hesitate to contact myself or Eduardo. We can work with you over the phone, or you can submit a service request for us to come in and provide some on-the-site assistance as well. We want to get all of you to where you need to be in regards to these, so we are absolutely happy to help in any way we can. Your 10 standards of Main Street justifications and accomplishments is a document that we will ask you to submit prior to our arrival for your annual site visit. And the 10 standards include having a comprehensive Main Street work plan, we just touched on that, having an adequate operating budget, we touched on that, having an active board of directors and committees, having a paid professional executive director, talked about that, reporting your key statistics, we've talked about that, demonstrating broad-based community support for the revitalization process with strong support from both the public and private sectors, having developed a vision and mission statements are relevant to your community conditions and to the local Main Street program's organizational stage, possessing a historic preservation ethic. Hopefully you're not advocating for tearing down historic buildings, conducting a program of ongoing training for staff and volunteers, and we at New Mexico Main Street help you facilitate that. And then being a current member of the National Trust Main Street Network, which New Mexico Main Street does pay your membership in that network for you. So this is just a sample of what what standard number 1 would look like in the document that we send all of you to ask for your feedback. So it's focus on the Main Street work plan, but then you'll see there's a variety of different sentences underneath that we ask you to check off whether or not you are achieving. Now, please understand that if you only check off 3 of those boxes that are there, that is not going to impact your accreditation. We want you to be honest because we want to know how we can help you and identify areas that you need to strengthen. So don't feel like you have to just check everything off to make sure that you get accredited. Underneath each of these standards, we also have a box where we ask you to actually type in and talk a little bit about the work you're doing. So you'll see for this one, it's asking you to identify the process used for developing and implementing your work plan, describe who was involved in implementing the task, and how the board conducts regular reviews of progress on your work plan commitment. So there will be something similar for each of those 10 standards that we just went over that you will be asked to respond to whenever we come in for your site visit. And I do want to also reiterate that this should not just be coming back to us just from staff. This should have the board engaged in responding to these questions as well. You can use whatever process you want to achieve this, but we want to make sure that the board is also involved in justifying the 10 standards. Now, we also asked you to send us a list of your accomplishments. So that should be a 1 to 2 page bulleted list. And it should be from the 12 months prior to our visit to see you. And I would definitely suggest that you frame this around your economic transformation strategies and the projects that you are working on. Please do not neglect this, because this is how we learn about what your organization achieved over the last 12-month period. Sometimes people, I think, struggle with exactly what information to relay to us here in this document. And so myself or Eduardo would be happy to talk to you a little about what we're looking for, because we want to hear about the accomplishments. We want to hear about the outcomes. We don't want to hear about the outputs. We don't want to hear that you went to a meeting. We want to hear about what the results of attending that meeting were. So in addition to the documents that we require of you, the National Main Street Center requires that each of your organizations sign a sub-licensing agreement. This allows you to utilize the Main Street logos. Now, these are distributed by New Mexico Main Street, and our lovely friend Anna Blythe will send those to each of you next time they are ready to have those renewed. The federal government, oh, go ahead, Anna.
Sorry, since you mentioned the sub-licenses, this year the National Main Street Center is actually going to be sending them directly to the executive directors, including us in on that message, and I'm happy to kind of follow back up with the National Main Street Center about when they're going to distribute those. But there has been discussion about getting the 2018 ones out.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Yeah.
And by the way, everyone, I realize that I've now been talking for like 35 minutes, and I'm sorry, I did not think I was just turning into a little bit longer of a webinar than I thought, but I hope you can all stick around for the end. We're like 2/3 of the way through. So the federal government does require you to file a IRS Form 990. So that is basically you as a nonprofit filing your tax documents with them. And hopefully you have a bookkeeper or an accountant that assists you in that process. And the state government requires you to update annually your registration with the Secretary of State. And it also requires you to update annually your registration with the Attorney General. Now, since I am going long on time, I'm not going to actually click on these here, but you will have these. You'll have this PDF available to you. The first one underneath each of these is the link that will take you to the portal where you enter and sign in to update your information. When you go to the Secretary of State page, you'll actually see a video there that walks you through the process of updating your registration with us. The Secretary of State is very simple. Basically requires a short few sentences on the work that your organization does, who your current board members and board of directors are, and pretty much everything else. It'll just autofill for you. So that one is not a lot of work. What I have there on the second link underneath each of these is actually where you can go to look for organizations. And this is how Eduardo and I, when we're getting ready to do your annual site visit, we actually will go and search and see if you've updated your information if we're not seeing it in the digital dashboard. So I would also suggest that you go there and take a look up your organization so you can see what pops up whenever people search for your organization. The New Mexico Attorney General registration is more involved than the Secretary of State is. And it is important that you have that done. If you do not have these registrations completed, you are not in compliance with the government. And that does impact your ability to apply and receive some grants. So please, please, please get those taken care of. Attorney General is going to ask you for a copy of your IRS Form 990. And if you haven't, say you're delinquent and haven't updated in a few years, it is going to ask you for every single 990 that you are missing. The other information, it'll just ask you to update the current information. So it'll ask you for your board members and their addresses. It'll ask you about your budget, how much your budget is going to management, how much is going to programs, and how much is going to fundraising. And that can be a little bit involved as well, because you have to really kind of sit down and think about it. For instance, as a staff person, you have to divvy up your time between those three areas and identify, well, I put $10,000 of my salary toward program management. I put 10,000 towards fundraising, whatever. So you do have to sit down and spend a little more time on that registration. And again, Eduardo and I are happy to help and assist in any way and answer any questions that you might have. Okay, so how are we keeping track of all this information? Well, the digital dashboard. I know some of you have been in there already, and some of you are just getting acquainted with it. And in the future, it will become your close friend. So after you log in, you will see these 4 different areas. There will be green, yellow, or red lights illuminated underneath them, and that will tell you where you're at as far as achieving compliance, Executive Director certification, or MainStreet America accreditation. You then will click on those titles, the headings of each one, and that will take you into the next page where you can see a little bit more information about where you are and what you've achieved within that compliance element section. So you'll see that there's been files that have been uploaded, and then Eduardo and I will go in and we will mark whether or not the program has successfully achieved that element. And then we can also add comments in that middle box section as well. If you go in there and you make a lot of updates and you want to let Eduardo or I know, just send us an email and we can go in there and we can check those off as achieved or change the comments. Occasionally you'll make some changes and you won't see us go in there and do anything to it. Well, that just means we haven't had any reason to check your dashboard, so we haven't made those changes because we are not alerted ourselves when you make changes. So again, feel free to send us an email, let us know, hey, I made some changes. Will you go in there and make the adjustments because I want to know where exactly I'm at. If you are missing any of these documents or you'll be delayed in uploading them, please let us know before we come out and do your annual accreditation, because otherwise we're just going to keep bugging you that and asking you, where is it, where is it, where is it? So keep in mind, this is actually a screenshot from the documents repository. This is not just for us, it's for you as well. We want you to be able to upload your own documents here so you can have a history for your organization. This is helpful when you have a staff person leave and you don't necessarily know where these documents are, or even for yourself as a staff person, you'll always know that you can find them in one place. So you'll see here is Raton dashboard. They have their master plan, their ACD plan, their historic district map, their LEDA ordinance, their Beaver report. They've got a lot of good information in there that they can access. So I'm just going to exit out of this PowerPoint really quickly, and here's the stuff thing that always pops up. I'm going to quickly log in and just show you the dashboard in case you haven't seen it. Now, this is a little bit different for me because I am an administrator. So I am actually able to access all of your activities. So I'm going to just go into Raton really quick because I know that they have everything up to date in here because I was snooping around in here yesterday. So you'll see I can scroll down and just click on the compliance elements. Again, this is a little different for me because I'm an administrator, so I can actually go in here and type whatever I want note-wise in here to make sure we have everything. But you'll see you can upload a document. It will replace whatever is currently in there. So it's not like, say you're uploading your conflict of interest disclosure statements here. They all have to be in one document together. If you upload them individually, we will only see the last one you uploaded. So please, please, please keep that in mind. And also remember that whenever you are done uploading, you always have to go down and click Update Local. Otherwise, it will not save your changes, and we do not want that to happen. When you go into training and certification, we will actually record here, and Anna helped Eduardo and I with this as well. We will record when you've completed each of the trainings we went over earlier. We'll make notes about whether or not you attended leadership network meetings, and some of this will probably be edited a bit moving forward, but not much. And we'll note whether you went to national conference. And then when you get down to the MainStreet America accreditation section, this actually lays out all those different elements I mentioned earlier that are underneath each of the 10 standards. So we don't necessarily always go in and fill in all this information because we have it in the document you submit to us, but we do go in and check them off and say, yes, they've achieved this, or we might make a note if it's something we think that they could work on going forward. And then you scroll all the way down, and you'll see at the bottom that this is where you upload your 10 standards of performance document, your justifications and accomplishments that we asked you for. And finally, go down to the document repository. Again, I just showed you the screenshot, and you'll see that you have a place where you can upload all these different documents. Hang on to them. This is also where I upload your annual service delivery reports that I distributed at the Winter Quarterly. Those are all here. And then Keith typically will go in and upload your reinvestment summary, which is a summary of all those quarterly reports that you submit to him. And then if we have access to these documents, we will upload them for you. But this is also here for you to upload whatever you need. So they also have their IRS determination letter and their articles of incorporation. Having those in digital format and in one place is going to be a huge help to you. So I definitely recommend getting them up there if you can. So just one more slide or two. So basically all of this information, that we've been collecting goes into the digital dashboard. And so prior to your annual site visit, you will get an email from Eduardo or I that will remind you to please go in and update the digital dashboard with all your annual compliance documents and requirements. We will also send you that 10 standards of performance report and ask that you complete it with your board, as well as your accomplishments. We will send you a link to an annual partner survey that we will ask you to send out to your municipal partners, other nonprofits you partner with, business owners, whoever you want to send it to, where we get some feedback from them on your organization. And then when we come in to visit you, we actually will have separate meetings with the executive director, the board president, your local government officials, and then we'll do a combined board and staff meeting at the end. This typically takes about a half day, maybe 4 to 5 hours, sometimes less, depending upon the organization. And typically we do these site visits between September and November because we have to have all the information submitted to National by the end of the calendar year. So accredited versus affiliate. Well, when you are accredited, you have 2 services available in each of the 4 points. You have 8 total. You also have access to public infrastructure funds for construction-ready projects. And as you know, we got $500,000 this year from the state legislature, or I don't know if it's been signed by the governor yet, but we think we have $500,000. So this money will be available for accredited programs to apply for. As an affiliate, you only have 1 service annually in each of the 4 points, so 4 total. You do have access to public infrastructure funds for planning. However, we often try to identify other locations for planning funds. And this would only be maybe for a newer organization like Redoso, who, for example, who is looking to create a master plan for their district. So this might be a place for them to get funding for that if we can't identify another location for them to receive that money from. So you might be asking, well, how do you determine which of these I'm in? Well, everything we just reviewed. We look at your 10 standards of Main Street justification and your accomplishments. We look at where you're at as far as your operating budget, your staffing time, and your municipal contributions. We look at your compliance documents. We track your training and attendance. We participate in an annual site visit with you and encourage you to have at least 80% of your board engaged and involved in that. And then we also verify that you have your strategies and that you are doing work to move them forward. Now, say you're missing a few compliance documents, you're not going to get dinged and moved down to affiliate for that reason. We are very flexible and very willing to work with you on helping you achieve accreditation because ultimately we want every single one of our communities to have it. Where you will get dinged often happens when you lose an executive director and don't have a staff person there moving work forward for an extended period of time. What happens is the work drops off and isn't implemented, And then that's where we come in and we see that you haven't been making the progress in your 4-point projects and moving those strategies forward. Or your operating budget is well below what it should be to be an accredited program, or your staff person is not where they should be as far as their hours per week requirements. As I said, we always want to work with you to help you get to where you need to be. We want you to be in compliance, and we want you to be accredited. So anytime you think you might need help or assistance, please, please, please reach out to Eduardo or myself, and Rich and Daniel as well. I know I went way long on this webinar and covered a lot of information, but if you have any questions for me, please, please, please feel free to ask now or send me an email afterwards. I am happy to assist and answer anything I can.
I was going to say, this is Anna again, and if anybody did want to raise your hand, you can do that, and I can unmute you if you want to speak to the group, and you're not required to ask questions. And as Amy mentioned, if you think of something later, you can directly reach out to Amy. I might give folks another minute, see if anybody types in anything.
Yeah, I have to say, Anna and I joked earlier because I told her, oh, I'm going to take half an hour. Is that okay? And look, 50 minutes later.
Covered a lot of good information. I think it's going to be really useful. Okay. And actually, we just got some feedback. Thank you, Charmaine from Silver City. She said, thank you so much. And she'll have her board watch this on YouTube, and said it was great info. So
awesome. Glad to hear it.
So, props to you, Amy, for leading us through a great session. All right. Well, on that note, we may end the webinar then, and we thank you all so much for tuning in today and taking time to join us. And again, thanks, Amy, for all the fantastic information. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anna.